Hello grade 9 students, we are now on our quarter 2 of our subject Mathematics 9, and the first topic to be discussed in quarter 2 is all about variations. So in this topic we will learn how to deal with the different kinds of variations like direct variation, inverse variation, joint variation, and combined variation. So the MELC, or the most essential learning competency, illustrates situations that involve the following variations: direct, inverse, joint, and combined. And for the learning objectives, we have illustrates direct, inverse, joint, and combined variation. Identify situations that imply direct, inverse, joint, and combined variation. And cite situations that imply direct, inverse, joint, and combined variation. So variation is simply the value of y that is changing with the different values of x. And these are the terms related to variation. Number one is the variable. Variable is the value of the quantity that changes under varying conditions. And number two, constant. It is the value of the quantity that does not change under different conditions. Yung variable pwedeng mag-change, pero yung constant, it does not change. Example, the equation of y equals 5x. This is an example of a variation equation, and the constant of this variation, wherein the symbol for constant of variation is small letter k, is 5 here. So 5, yan. And that this constant of variation will not ever change. Whereas the variables are x and y, so ito yung mag-change yung variables, mag-change yung kanyang mga values. Pero yung constant, it does not change. So there are different types of variation. Let's start with A, direct variation. In direct variation, as x increases, y also increases. Similarly, as x decreases, y also decreases. So if we are given a table of values, for example, yung values of x, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then yung value of y, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. So in that table of values, as x increases, y also increases. So that's an example of a direct variation. Or as x decreases, y also decreases. Example, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for x. Yun naman y, 20, 18, 16, 14, 12, etc. So in that case, as x decreases, y also decreases. That's an example of a direct variation. So if a situation is modeled by an equation of the form y equals kx, where k is not equal to 0, and k is referred to as the constant of the variation, where k is equal to y over x, right? So therefore, y equals kx is what we call the equation of a direct variation, and k is the constant of variation. And if we are asked to solve for k, we can use this equation: k is equal to y over x, equation or formula. Yes, just divide y by x to get the value of k, or the constant of variation, in a direct variation. So we have here the following statements that may imply the direct variation. Y varies directly as x. So direct variation yan. That statement, that's an example of a direct variation statement. Another direct variation statement: y is directly proportional to x. Right? And another, y is proportional to x. Okay. So basta may directly, or simply proportional to x, that means it is a direct variation. And always remember, its equation is y equals kx, where k is not equal to 0. Examples of situations that imply direct variations: the area of a square as related to its side. So the bigger the side, the larger the area. See? That's an example of a direct variation. Diba? If the side is 2, what is the area of the square? 4. If the area is 3, what is the area of the square? 9. So as the bigger the side, the larger the area. Another, the family expenses are related to the number of children in the family. So it explains here that the more family members, the higher the family expenses. So mas maraming anak, mas marami yung family expenses, of course. Another, number 3, the cost of rice depends on the number of bags. The higher the number of bags of rice, the higher the cost. Direct variation yun. The more time I drive, the more miles I go. Yes. The longer the time you drive, the more miles you can go. The more hours I work, the more money I make. Yeah, especially pag nag-overtime ka, the more money you will make. So, the more the time, the more money. That means it is a direct variation. As x increases, y also increases. Direct variation can be shown from the table of values in its graph. In the table of values, y is directly proportional to x. So, dito na yung table. As you can see, we have the values of x, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the values of corresponding values of y, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So, as you can see, as x increases, y also increases. So, this is an example of a direct variation expressed in terms of a table of values. So we have here the question: find the constant of variation. Okay, given the equation of the variation y equals kx. So the equation of direct variation is this one, y equals kx. So the question is, what is the constant of variation from this table? So we can use the formula. K is equal to y over x. So just divide y by x. So 2 divided by 1, 2. 4 divided by 2, 2. 6 divided by 3, 2. 8 divided by 4, 2. 10 divided by 5, 2. 12 divided by 6, 2. So, as you can see, the constant of variation is 2. So, therefore, the equation is from y equals kx, substitute k by 2, then we have y equals 2x. Right? So, that is how to find the equation of the constant of variation and the equation of variation. First, we solve the value of k. Just divide y by x, and then substitute in the equation of variation y equals kx. So we can see that the constant of variation can be solved if 1/4 of the values of x and y is known, and it shows from the table that as x increases, the value of y also increases at the constant of variation, which is 2. Okay, this is the graph of a direct variation. As x increases, y also increases. So the graph of the table of values show that if the value of x increases, the value of y also increases at the constant variation. And the graph of direct variation is a straight line with slope k that passes through the origin. So in other words, yung k is also the same as the slope when we're going to graph. Yes. 1, 2 over 1. Yes, 2 over 1 is 2. So if k is 2, that means the slope is also 2. Terms of the graph. So now let's go to the inverse function. So in direct variation, as x increases, y also increases. How about if we are speaking about inverse variation? So if a situation is modeled by an equation of the form y is equal to k over x, where k is a constant of variation and k is not equal to 0, it is read as y varies inversely as x, or y is inversely proportional to x. So for the two quantities x and y, an increase in x causes a decrease in y, or vice versa. So this is the difference between inverse and direct. So direct, as x increases, y also increases. Sa inverse naman, as x increases, y decreases. So baliktad, mag-increase yung x, mag-decrease yung y. That's an inverse variation. So we have here some statements that can model inverse variation. So y varies inversely as x, or y is inversely proportional to x. Yun. And the equation is y is equal to kx. So that if you're going to solve for k, just multiply y and x. Right? K is the constant of variation. So direct variation, y equals kx. K times x. Dito no, y is equal to k divided by x. That's the difference. And sa direct variation, to solve for k, divide y by x. Pero sa inverse variation, to solve for k, we multiply y and x. So we have here some examples of situations that imply inverse variation. The number of hours to finish a job to the number of men working. If more men will work, the number of hours spent for the job will be lesser. Yes. If more men will work, for example in a construction, if there are 20 men, okay, they will finish the job sooner. Yes, sooner than later. So that means that implies an inverse variation. Okay, that's a situation that implies inverse variation. Another, the age of a car to its resale value. The older the car, the less is the price when sold. Yan. So as yung car, habang nasa sayo yan, for example 10 years na yung car mo, then the less is price when sold. So for example, if you bought your car now at 1 million pesos, okay, after 10 years it might be 200,000 pesos na lang. So the age of a car to its resale value. The older the car, the less is the price when sold. So mas maganda pag bili ka na lang ng lupa. Ayun, direct variation yun. The age of the lot to its resale value. The older the lot, the more is the price when sold. The number of pizza slices related to the number of persons sharing a whole pizza. If more persons share pizza, the less will be the number of pizzas eaten by each person. Okay, that's an example of an inverse variation. So inverse variation can be shown from the table of values and its graph. So the table shows that y is inversely proportional to x. You can see we have here the values of y 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, while the value of y 20, 10, 5, 4, 2, 1. So as x increases, y decreases. So this is an example. So this table shows that y is inversely proportional to x. This is an example of an inverse variation. Okay, find the constant of variation. So the equation of variation is, we have here y is equal to k over x. So to solve for k, we just multiply y by x. Then what is y? 21. 20 times 1, 20. 10 times 2, 20. 5 times 4, 20. 4 times 5, 20. 10 times 2, 20. 20 times 1, 20. So the constant of variation is 20. Therefore, the equation of the variation is y equals k over x. Substitute k by 20. So we have here y is equal to 20 over x. Is the constant of the equation of the variation. Equation of the inverse variation. The table shows that if the values of x increases, the value of y decreases at the constant of variation, which is 20. Okay, ito naman ang graph ng inverse variation. The graph of the table of values shows that the increase in the value of y results with a decrease in the value of x. So the graph of an inverse variation is a hyperbola, whereas sa direct variation it's a straight line. Dito naman hyperbola pag inverse variation. Let us proceed now to the next. Another type of variation is called the joint variation. So sa direct variation, as x increases, y increases. Sa inverse variation, as x increases, y decreases. How about pag joint? So if the situation is modeled by an equation of the form y equals kxz, where k is a constant of variation, we read it as y varies jointly as x and z. So pag joint, I think there is another variable aside from y and x, which is z. So yan, ito yung equation ng joint variation, y equals kxz. And if we're going to solve for k, we just divide y by xz. Joint variation takes place when one quantity varies directly as the product of two or more quantities. Samples of situations that imply joint variations. So we have number 1, the force applied to an object is related to the mass and acceleration. Right? So dalawa yan dalawang variables. The force is related to mass and acceleration, m and a. So that's an example of joint variation. The area of parallelogram related to the length of the base and altitude. So there are two variables, base and height, related to the area. Joint yan. The electrical voltage bar is jointed to the current and the resistance. Current and resistance. The area of a triangle to the length of the base and its altitude. The pressure depends on the density and its absolute temperature. Yon. Now, we have here some examples of equations that imply joint variation. V is equal to 2 pi r squared. Volume. Another. R is equal to kyz. S equals to krt. 4 is equal to t equals 1 half rstq. And d is equal to 4abc. Right. So pag joint, it involves 2 or more variables. How about pag combined? Combined, if the situation is modeled by an equation of the form y is equal to kx over z, where k is a constant, we say y varies directly as x and inversely as z. So parang combination of direct and inverse proportion ito, combined, you know. So joint, it consists of 2 or more variables, so x, y, z. Ganon din dito sa combined. Pero sa combined, nag-combine yung direct and inverse variations. So combined variation takes place if one quantity varies directly or jointly as the other quantities and inversely as the other quantities. It involves combination of direct, inverse, and joint variations. Yes. Combined pala, yes. It involves combination of direct, inverse, and joint. Examples of situations that imply combined variation. The current of the electromotive force over its resistance. The acceleration of an object to the force exerted over its mass. The pitch of a stretched vibrating string to the square of the tension over the length of the string. Examples of equations that imply combined variation. V is equal to 5LW over H. That means volume is directly proportional to length and its width, and inversely proportional to height. A is equal to KST over VR. I is equal to PRT over KZ squared. So for summaries, we have here the direct variation. You can screenshot on this part so as to have the comparison of the 4 types of variation. So pag direct, the equation is y equals kx. Inverse, y is equal to k over x. Excuse me. So pag sa joint, y equals kxz. And pag sa combined, y is equal to kx over z. So you can see the difference of among the equations of variation with each type. So direct variation, we have some these are the variables variation statements. Y varies directly as x. Y is directly proportional to x. Y is proportional to x simply means kahit di mo na sabihin yung directly, it means direct. Meron ding special case ng direct variation, yung direct square variation. Y is equal to kx squared. Y varies directly as the square of x. So still, that's an example of a direct variation. Excuse me. Pag inverse variation, y varies inversely as x, or y is inversely proportional to x. We have also here another indirect square variation. We have y is equal to k over x squared. That means y is inversely proportional to the square of x. Sa pag sa joint, y varies jointly as x and z. Pag sa combined, y varies directly as x and jointly as z. So let us now have some exercises. You can do this. Write y if the situation implies a direct variation in f, and if not. Number 1, the number of days to finish a job to the number of workers. Answer, number 1. Okay. No, it is not a direct variation. Yes, I think that's an inverse variation. Anna's commission to the number of sales. Yes. Direct variation, variation yan. As Anna's commission go higher, the number of sales go higher also. How about number 3, the relation of pressure to the depth? Okay, no, that's not an example of a direct variation. Number 4 is yes, the area of a square of the length to the length of its side. Yes, as As site increases, the area also increases. About number 5, electric consumption to the number of electric appliances used. Yes, direct variation. Yan. Next, tell whether the variable x and y varies directly. Right, yes if it varies, and no if it's not. Yes or no lang yan. Kung direct variation yung equation. Yes, for number 1, y equals 5x. Kasi sa direct variation, the equation is y equals kx. How about number 2? Yes pa rin. Yes ba yan? Tell whether the variable x and y varies directly. Yes. Yes, they vary directly. For number 2. How about number 3? Yes pa rin. Magiging 1x. Y is equal to x yan. That means y equals x. So the constant of variation is 1 sa number 3. So it's yes, a direct variation. How about number 4? Okay, no, kasi ano yan? Inverse na yan. Y is equal to kx. K over x. How about number 5? No, kasi joint na ito. Joint variation na yan. Y varies jointly as x and y. Maybe Z yun yung y. Kamali na naman. Typographical error. Next, write in I and V to the situations that demonstrate an inverse variation. Otherwise, write not. Okay, sabihin lang just write I and V kapag inverse variation yung mga situations dito. Write not if it's not. Number 1, the number of days for food to last is the number of persons sharing the food. That's an inverse variation. Number 2, the total cost of milk to the number of milks per pack. That's not an inverse variation. Number 3, the number of workers doing a job to the number of days needed for completion. That's an inverse variation. Number 4 is also an inverse variation. The age of used motorcycle to the price the owner gets if he sells it. Number 5, the circumference of a circle is related to its diameter. That's not an inverse variation. So number 5, direct variation yan. Also with number 2, direct variation. And the rest, inverse variation na. Ito naman, classify each situation whether it implies joint or combined variation. Write dv if it's direct, ib if it's inverse, and jb if it's joint. Number 1, the length of the candle and the length of time burning it. IB means it's an inverse. Number 2, db means direct. The number of battle crowns you collect and your chance of winning promotion. Number 3, the electrical voltage is the current and the resistance. JB joint, joint variation. Kasi involves 2 or more variables, current and resistance and the voltage. Number 5, joint again. The area parallelogram to the length of its base and altitude consists of 2 or more variables, area, base, and altitude. And number 5, direct variation. The amount of deposit in the bank and the amount of interest it earns. Direct variation. Thank you very much for listening. This is part 1 of our topic in variation. I'll see you in part 2. Bye.